From 1968 to 1992, a total of 16 medals were stripped away from athletes due to doping, and from 2000 to 2006, there were 30. In 2008 alone, there were 49, a record that stands unbroken. But not for the lack of trying, for in the following 10 years, there were 38 medals taken. An increase of this magnitude can't be a coincidence. It's proof. Proof that doping has expanded its scope and become a worldwide problem that has spread to international sporting events across the globe. The World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, an independent agency under the International Olympic Committee, has been fighting the spread of doping for over half a century. It was assumed that with enough educational programs, testing, and supportive medical treatment, that the substance abuse would gradually cease to exist. Unfortunately, this hasn't happened because athletes have developed new, powerful, and nearly untraceable doping techniques that have been a challenge for anti-doping organizations like WADA to keep up with. This has allowed the world of athletic doping the chance to develop and sophisticate its use and methods that are nearly undetectable under tests. In fact, the largest breakthrough that the anti-doping agency has had in recent years is the Russian state-sponsored doping scandal between 2015 and 2018. This state-sponsored scandal, in result, gave insights to WADA about how corrupted WADA-certified anti-doping labs may potentially be a major resource for substance-abusing athletes. They would aid the dishonest athletes to gain knowledge of knowing when a test will be conducted and how the athletes could mask their samples to prevent an adverse analytical finding, AAF, or otherwise known as a positive result. However, this hasn't been the only time doping in sports has occurred. In fact, doping can be traced back to 776 BC when Greek Olympians would gorge themselves on meat, which at the time wasn't normal, in efforts of enhancing their physical performance. It wasn't until a juncture after the 1960 Rome Summer Olympics did the death of an athlete become a catalyst for the IOC to begin the process of banning performance enhancement substances for the next Olympic Games. The athlete who died that year on August 26 was a Danish cyclist by the name of Knud Jensen, who died during his 100-meter team trial race, fracturing his skull in the fall. It was later revealed in his autopsy that Jensen had traces of amphetamine called Ronico. This disaster led the IOC in 1967 to establish medical commissions to fight doping in sports, which then influenced the IOC's decision in having a compulsory drug test for the 1967 Mexico City Summer Olympics, out of which one of 667 participants were caught doping. Afterwards, in 1972 Munich Summer Olympics, did the IOC finally establish a full-scale drug test on participating athletes. This meant that testing was much more comprehensive, acquiring 2,000 samples, of which 7 were disqualified. It wasn't until in November of 1999 when the IOC set an initiative to establish the World Anti-Doping Agency as an independent agency in efforts to fight doping. Now, when WADA tests athletes for banned substances, they usually look for traces of the substance under certain classes of drugs. In detail, WADA has 13 classifications of drugs, which are anabolic agents, peptide hormone growth factors and related substances, beta-2 agonist, hormone and metabolic modulators, diuretics and other masking agents, stimulants, narcotics, cannabinoids, glucocorticosteroids, alcohol, beta blockers, enhancements of oxygen transfer, and finally chemical and physical manipulation. What all these drug classes have in common is their ability to prevent athletes from feeling fatigued during a competition, which is the largest reason as to why athletes dope, not to only be strong physically, but mentally, blocking their brain stimuli that acts as a burden of being fatigued and pushing them to dangerously new heights, to the point where they can face life-threatening injuries. Even worse are the side effects of these drugs, which can often lead to organ failure, as well as certain gender-specific side effects which may be life-threatening and extremely painful. Although doping is wrong, and we absolutely shouldn't encourage it, the public is not entirely without blame. To clarify, the pressures that we the public place on an athlete is absolutely tremendous, especially when they are representing an entire country. Fans of certain sports expect that athlete to perform to their best abilities, in hopes of seeing a world record broken. This in turn causes a ripple effect. affecting the athletes as they develop a more aggressive mindset where they must do anything to win. The same ripple effect has also affected amateur athletes who are pressured to getting their spot as a professional athlete. In fact, in a study conducted in 2013 by the Partnership Attitude Tracking Studies, said about 11% of teens in the U.S. dope to enhance their performance in order to gain attentions of scouts so they can attain their sports dream in the future. Another key motive for doping is due to sponsors. Sponsors are what allow an athlete to continue their dream of becoming the top athlete in their sport. Sponsors are able to provide money to allow athletes to cover their living expenses, as well as their training for the future competitions and sports, making millions in endorsements. For example, Shaun White, an Olympic snowboarder, has made over $20 million from various endorsement deals throughout his career of being an Olympian. In turn, this has created another new and dangerous mindset of which athletes are paying for future financial and social stability, which is essentially a second subset of high risk and high reward stakes. Meaning that if all goes well, an athlete will be able to gain sponsors for money as well as fame and major support. However, if all goes wrong and the athlete is caught doping, they can lose everything from sponsors to their accreditation, as well as the future possibility to compete in any major event. In fact, in 2018, when the World Anti-Doping Agency released their 2016 Anti-Doping Rule Violation (ADRV) report, the results were astonishing. Within the report, there was shocking data showing a total of 1,595 ADRVs given to athletes in that year, involving individuals from 117 countries. There were 1,326 of the ADRVs derived from sample classed as an AAF, while the remainder were derived from investigations and evidence-based intel of 248 violations committed by athletes and 21 linked to athlete support personnel, ASP. However, the World Anti-Doping Agency have been able to pull through and generate an idea that could potentially stop doping, which is called Athlete Biological Passport, ABP. Essentially, what an ABP is a way to monitor selected biological variables over time that indirectly reveal the effects of doping rather than attempt to detect doping substance or methods directly. This method of detection of monitoring selected variables over time is actually more reliable because it allows a huge window for athletes to be caught for doping and can be told when in time an athlete doped. This makes testing programs much more efficient than what it was before, and much cheaper too. The reason why the ABP is cheaper is because it requires less testing, therefore saving money on constant randomized testing, as each drug test can cost up to $400. Then again, athletes are always looking for loopholes to the system. One such loophole commonly used to get around ABPs is called microdosing. Microdosing is when an athlete takes small amounts of the prohibited substance, little and as often as possible. By ingesting such small amounts, this allows an athlete to avoid detection by shortening the detection window of the substance being present in the body, whereas taking a larger amount would show up on a test. However, this may be a challenge for anti-doping agencies, but the impact of the ABP is that athletes who are doping have to resort to taking smaller amounts of the substance, which in itself is a positive change by potentially reducing the athlete's long-term health effects. The next step as technology advances is to be able to detect microdosing and other hard-to-capture doping mechanisms. But more importantly is what we as the public can do to fix this issue. From the pressures put on these athletes to the microdosing and corruptions in certified labs, it's crucial that we as a society should put an end to doping and revive the very meaning of what it means to be an athlete. We should foster the right values for an athlete and nurture it. It's by these principles that the complete abolishment of doping can be achieved. So I ask you, where do you stand?